So 5 measures can realize 85% of the reduction potential in greenhouse gas emissions of the model Germany. And 6 measures account for 70% of the resource consumption potential. I think before we started the model, we were thinking that those are the measures that have the greatest impact. But I think how much impact they have compared to all the recycling measures or the technical measures, I think was quite a surprise.
Got my coffee and today's guest here with me, so we're ready to roll. Welcome to the Circular Coffee Break podcast, where we will be casually talking about everything circular and beyond. Now, my guest today is Jonas Aechtner, Senior Project Manager, Circular Economy at WWF Germany. Among many other things, Jonas has been involved in developing the Circular Economy Model Germany that we will be talking about later in this episode. I'm looking forward to discussing this and many other topics around circular economy and the activities of WWF Germany today. Welcome to the show, Jonas.
Thanks, Michael.
Really happy to have you here. As I mentioned before we pressed record, I've really been reading through the circular economy model Germany and been looking into that in detail. So really looking forward to jump into that in more detail. But to get us started, could you maybe introduce yourself briefly and share a bit about your role and your work at WWF Germany, particular in relation to circular economy initiatives?
Sure. Yeah, good to get started. I think my first connection with circular economy was during my bachelor's, now over 10 years ago. We had some external speakers talking about circular economy, and I was just fascinated about this concept, no waste, to not have it. Just made sense. Now this whole discussion around circular economy has changed more towards less unnecessary products or less unnecessary consumption, and I'm super happy about this momentum. I then had my professional contact with circular economy during my time at UNDP in Laos, where I supported the development of a strategy for the government there. And after I changed to WWF Germany, I heard about this pioneering study, the Circular Economy Model Germany, and I was just super excited to get involved into this study and change to the Circular Economy team. And this is what we did kind of last year, and at the moment, we are trying to make most out of the findings and getting all the findings implemented.
Great. And you mentioned already WWF has been actively working on circular economy concepts. What motivated WWF to develop the Circular Economy Model Germany, and what were the key questions addressed in the model during the study that you have been conducting?
So with the start of our current government, we managed to get the development of a national circular economy strategy in the coalition agreement, WWF, together with different environmental NGOs in Germany. And this was a big step. And we all knew and thought circular economy is a very important lever for the environment and for people, that there's a lot of potential in this entire circular economy space. But we didn't know how much positive impact there is, any trade-offs, what are more important measures, what should we prioritize on. And this was the entire idea behind the Circular Economy Model Germany. We wanted to dig deep into different sectors, so to find out what sectors have the big impact, what measures in these sectors, what's more important, which kind of activities do we go more into rethinking, reduction, sufficiency activities or measures, or do we go more in recycling where is the power of circular economy? Mm-hmm. And finally, we wanted to know how to translate this into policy, in Germany. So to link it to this development of the national circular economy strategy for Germany and like show our government and the Ministry of Environment where they should focus and how to get this impact done.
Interesting. And you mentioned the correlation between the different areas and the different sectors and the different industries. And the model actually emphasizes the holistic approach of circular economy as we're talking about a systemic change of basically the whole economic model that you have in the country, including interactions, central indicators, and so on and so forth. Could you maybe explain a little bit the importance of these aspects and how they contribute to the success of the circular economy initiative? So what's the importance of these correlations of the different stakeholders, of all of that coming together into one single model?
So this is actually the niche or the added value where we saw our work from WWF contributing to this. We wanted this, what you mentioned, holistic approach to a circular economy. So to move away from this waste-driven circular economy, from measures in this area, focusing on technological solutions, focusing on recycling. We wanted to move up the hierarchy in the 10 circular economy R's, or how we say it at WWF, reduce the resource streams. And actually, this is where I think most impact is the rethinking part of the circular economy. It's challenging, but I see that there is most potential. So do we think mobility or do we think cars? Do we think, or how can we make our living and working space more effectively? Or other questions like, do we need all the decorative lamps that we have around us that are glued together and super hard to recycle? So we wanted to integrate all these different hierarchies in the model to also be able to showcase where should the priority lie and where is most impact coming from. And we defined for most sectors, like all these kind of measures in the very beginning, and went back to interviews, invited experts to kind of analyze which measures are more important, what measures specifically we should look at moving on in the model.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And the sector selection and the example measures are actually a very important part of the model. Can you maybe provide some insights into how the sectors were chosen? You already alluded to it a little bit just now, and basically discuss any specific measures that have been particularly impactful that you've been looking at.
Sure. So as a base, we were most interested to look at the consumption in Germany, including investments in Germany. So let's say consumption over time. And the sectors were selected based on a ranking in this consumption, looking at the main indicators that we were interested in throughout the model in general. So greenhouse gas emission, resource depletion, land use as the big environmental indicators. And by looking at those, we were able to find out which sectors currently have most impact and that should be addressed in a circular economy in Germany as well. Another thing that was of great interest for us was what products and in the end materials have most environmental impact. So one thing that we wanted to know is also how can a circular economy in Germany support the economic systems. So how can we reduce some critical raw materials, for example, So the circular economy contributes to the economy in the future. And for the selection of this, we, for example, also analyze future technologies and studied relevant products and services with high environmental impact. So in the end, we came down with a list of 9 sectors. That was the base to develop measures in each sector, and that then was used to calculate and model the impact on the main indicators that we look at in the model Germany. And there we not only look at environmental indicators like the ones I mentioned, greenhouse gas emission, land use, and resource consumption, raw material consumption, but we also look at social indicators, for example, labor needs or gross value add in Germany. But we also look at the impact on strategical and environmental raw materials, so how we can reduce the need for those.
That's a very interesting topic, because I think what we're seeing, and I think we hear the discussion around the batteries and that we will not have enough raw materials to create all the batteries we will be needing for e-mobility and all the other electrification that we're looking at. But we're seeing something similar in a lot of very other industries where critical raw materials will be scarce going forward. So it's interesting that you're also looking at these, I would argue, more economic aspects of circular economy. And I think at the end of the day, they need to support each other in order for the model to work at the end of the day. Who were the parties you worked with in that context to understand the different sectors, the different industries? What stakeholders have you been engaging with in developing the model?
So this study was done together with Fraunhofer Institut, Öko-Institut, and Freie Universität Berlin, one of the universities here in Berlin, who have deep knowledge in or deep expertise in the different fields that we needed. So expertise, for example, in circular economy and what measures are most important. Fraunhofer is very good at modeling, and Freie Universität Berlin, our colleague there, was very close to resource policy in Germany and kind of knew the narrative at the moment, was able to suggest different policy instruments. And together, I think we were quite a diverse and strong consortium to write this study.
Interesting. And I mean, one of the central findings, I guess, that you could take out of the study, out of the model, is that sufficiency is by far the most effective strategy. Maybe not necessarily that surprising, but were there any surprising insights or confirmations that emerged from the research that you, when you looked at all of this in all that detail? And I'm sure there's much more detail that goes into it than the study and the publication that you can actually find on the webpage. But any insights, any topics you saw where you said, like, okay, this is an aspect that is really interesting or provides a new perspective there?
So generally speaking, when looking at the sector, so the narrative of this study is actually how many resources do we need in each sector today? How many resources or greenhouse gas emissions are emitted in 2045 if we continue as planned? And what does the model support? Like how many greenhouse gas emissions or how many resources do we need less if we implement all measures? And it's already interesting to see the ranking between the different sectors. Generally speaking, we can say we can save around a quarter, so 25%, over a quarter, in resource use, greenhouse gas emission. For land use change, or for land use needed, it's actually reduced by 30%. This is good data, but I think for me personally, most interesting was what are the most important measures by itself. And there we can take, for example, 5 measures that have most impact in greenhouse gas emissions. And these are, as you mentioned, all sufficiency-based, which I think is super interesting. We look at reducing or more effective usage of our living and working space, using less cars by, for example, using more public transport, using car sharing, using carpooling services, moving towards a planetary health diet, which means, in other words, eating less meat or less milk and cheese, less products like these, more resource efficient server centers, and less textile consumption by losing what we have longer and using different approaches, like, for example, product as a service, like sharing initiatives in the textile space. On the other hand, if we look at raw material consumption, cars and living space or living and working space is up there again. Textile consumption is up there again. Cement recycling has great potential, and server centers again is up there. So 5 measures can realize 85% of the reduction potential in greenhouse gas emissions of the model Germany. And 6 measures account for 70% of the resource consumption potential. I think before we started the model, we were thinking that those are the measures that have the greatest impact. But I think how much impact they have compared to all the recycling measures or the technical measures, I think was quite a surprise for me. And we learned a lot from these findings, and they also triggered very important discussions. And this was a big learning for me during the model as well. Because if we talk about showcasing our government that less cars is the solution in the mobility space, in the car and battery space, there's a lot of discussions around this. Germany is a car country. Yeah, you have to argue it well, so the government is on board to kind of implement measures that support this change, this transformation, and especially when you have an industry sector like the car sector in Germany, where a lot of jobs are linked to, you are completely in the space of just transition, like we know from the whole climate change discussion. There is a lot of transformation of our economy ahead of us if we want to really go down the circular economy path, and it needs to be accompanied by good policy so people don't lose motivation to follow down this path. On the other hand, so this is like the role of policy, I think, and the role of us as WWF talking to our policymakers. On the other hand, if we talk about the big impact of sufficiency-based measures, there is a lot of behavior change activities needed. It's a big decision, or it's a big change if you rent clothing or if you own clothing. If you need a hole in your wall and you go to the to the store and buy a drill, it's easy. That's the behavior we know. And we kind of lost track of ringing the bell on our neighbor's door, asking them for a drill, or looking for a rental option. It's just easier to do this consumption that we are used to. So this behavior change part is what got me thinking most after we finished the model Germany. And now a last point related to sufficiency. How do we get companies on board? And how do we get them ready? You can't just say, hey guys, you need to produce less. You need to have answers so they are ambitioned and motivated to kind of follow this path towards a holistic circular economy.
Yeah, and I think you're making a couple of really important points there. Because at the end of the day, as we talked briefly earlier, it's a systemic change. It's a major change we're talking about. In some areas, it will be easier. In other areas, it will be more difficult. But in order to really arrive at a circular economy model Germany, you need to make all of these changes because they are interrelated. One pays into the other. You already mentioned that a little bit. Let me maybe follow up there a bit. How have you been using the information from the Circular Economy Model Germany study? And what are the concrete steps that need to happen from your point of view so that this information can actually be used and be leveraged to drive that change, be it on the consumer side, be it on the in the public side, or be it on the side of companies, of corporations?
Yeah, and now we reached my today's business, let's say, as we really want to use these findings and move towards this holistic circular economy. I think there's different parts to it. One thing is this transformation or our idea of how we live and consume. How do we move this forward in our society? And I want to connect this maybe first to sharing. I like challenges, and we showcased on one hand that there is a lot of impact in sharing activities. Just as an example, if 3 people share a car, you need 2 less. If 3 people or 5 people share a drill, you need 4 less. But the challenge here is market penetration. So it's a big change for people to think in this different way. When I run out of butter, I don't know why, huh? It's easier for me to make the long way to the next supermarket just for some more butter than to knock on my neighbor's door. Where's this coming from? And this is, I think, a big thing that we need to address and to make it easier for people as well. Same for long living products. How can we consume in a different way, buying products that we use as long as possible? And one thing that I always have to think about in this space is Bauhaus. Bauhaus, like this initiative of architecture and furniture and all of this, it's 100 years old. Products are still hip and cool. Products are minimalistic. Products are long living. They have good quality. And if you want to buy one today, you pay a whole lot of money. How can we move towards this? How can we use this knowledge and use it for the creation of the new products that we produce? And in this regard, since one of the findings was actually using products longer and sharing products in the ICT, so in the information and communication sector, in the furniture sector, and in the textile sector, that's the big impact measures. So for these 3 sectors and for these 2 activities, sharing and using longer repair, all of this, we are in the second round of a project proposal, and I hope we can start mid next year with this project. So this is one thing that we follow on. And another thing that's been on my mind since Model Germany is this 7-ton target. So one thing that we ask politics and society and companies, that we need a society, a consumption of 7 tons raw materials per capita, so per person per year. At the moment in Germany, as an example, we are at 16. How do we get this as a priority up, like the 1.5 degree? But also, how can we communicate this in the society without people being afraid, oh, now you want to take me away my car, and now you want to take me away my holidays, my summer holidays. So finding good solutions, and I think there is potential in circular economy to find find lives with a similar quality of life within this 7-ton ratio per year. So communicating this and having solutions, having answers on hand when people ask you, and how should we achieve this? And this is actually another project we are working on at the moment. We started now by looking for data to go away from this average 7-ton average, and kind of define different ways of life, moving away from an average, but having different personas and examples, and then asking people in Germany, hey, what measures are you okay to change in your daily life? What are you okay with? What do we not even need to talk about anymore? And where are your red lines, your no-go lines? And hopefully by the end of 2025, we have a good set of measures and ideas that we can use for our policy work, for our communication, in this regard. And last but not least, one important thing that I think will move circular economy forward and the 7-ton goal forward is, in Germany, we are now in the last steps of our national circular economy strategy. And one big ask, and one thing that we've been working on a lot, is to have some kind of target on resource consumption in this strategy. And at the moment, there is a 8-ton goal in there. And this is something that should definitely stay in there. This would be super important to have this target setting in Germany. We are not the first ones in Germany to have this. There's different countries around. But I think we need to follow track. And the cherry on the cake for the next years would be if the government could commit to a specific legal framework for this resource target, maybe in form of a resource conservation law, to really get ambitious and move towards a holistic circular economy.
Cool. It sounds really good, and I think you're spot on. I mean, a lot of the things you referred to Bauhaus, which is a mindset of longevity, basically, from minimalistic longevity, and I think there's a lot of things that we actually don't need to learn, but we need to relearn. We need to rediscover them. If I think back, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years, it was completely normal to repair things. It was completely normal to borrow things from your neighbor. It was completely normal to do these things, but we have unlearned them over the years. So as you said, it's easier to go to the market, to the shop to buy things than to borrow them. And I think it's relearning these type of things. Now, unfortunately, the coffee is empty, and it's time to wrap up this episode of the Circular Coffee Break. But before we close, Jonas, before I let you go, let's maybe have a look into the future. If we would meet again in, let's say, 1 to 2 years, what would be the main things that you think should have happened, would have happened, based on all the different projects, the initiatives that you have outlined, that you're working on, that you're building on top of the circular economy model Germany? And what is the North Star that you would like to see happen in Germany in 2 years, maybe, with regards to the circular economy?
I think a big lever is policy. So I'd be happy if we have an ambitious national circular economy strategy in Germany. And the government, and also the next government, we have elections next year, is committed to follow this path, so that we manage to keep the momentum up and also manage to have some agenda setting around this 7-ton or maybe 8-ton resource consumption target, and that people are not afraid to move on this topic. This would be the star on the heaven. And I think those communication activities that we have around this is kind of feeding into this 7-ton target. Not to say that the work on longevity and repair and all of this is super important. I think these behavior change aspects, like you mentioned, making it people easier to do what we actually always did. So yeah, maybe in 2 years, this project is up and running and we were able to inspire some people to do what we always did and what is actually more sustainable, moving away from fast consumption.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Jonas, for joining me today. Really interesting topic, and I think we could have talked for another half hour easily. So maybe we'll revisit the topic in a year's time to see how all of these different strings and activities have been leading to concrete results. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Michael.
And for all of you out there listening, if you haven't looked into the Circular Economy Model Germany yet, you can find that on the webpage of WWF Germany, and we will also link the documents in the show notes so that you can have a look. It's a really interesting and really insightful read. And I think it's not only a model for Germany, but it's a model for every single country, basically, naturally with customizations here and there. But I think it gives a very good blueprint on what are the main topics. We hope you found today's episode interesting and inspiring and maybe got some new ideas on the topic of circular economy. If you like the podcast, you can help us growing the Circular Coffee Break community by giving us a 5-star rating and a positive review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Also, as the episodes drop every 2 weeks, please remember to subscribe to stay in the loop on the latest episodes with great guests. The only thing left for me is to thank all of you for joining us today, for listening, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all here at the Circular Coffee Break podcast.